Hi everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. I see some people crippling in there from the waiting room. Just give a couple minutes for everyone to join while we wait. So while we wait for everyone to join, why don't you start by adding in the chat where you're tuning in from? So I'll start. I'm tuning in from Vancouver, BC, where I'm located. And then Cece, do you want to share where you're tuning in from?
Yeah, I'll share. I'm in California, so right smack in the middle in Fresno.
Perfect. Just give a couple minutes for some other people to start joining the room. I do see some familiar names over there from customers that I've been helping and talking to. So that's amazing. We love to see that. I'll just give a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. We want to make sure that we've got enough time so that we can see CC can go over all the information about Aplos. Perfect. I see Doug, he's coming in from Atlanta. I see Monica from Toronto, Linda from Calgary. Thank you so much for sharing. James from Bruno, Saskatchewan. Amazing. Well, it's so nice to see so many people from different parts of Canada and the US and logging in from different time zones. Love that. So let's get started. So for the ones that don't know me, my name's Stefan and I lead all of our customer care team here at Keela. You might have had some email interactions with me in the past as well. So as I see some familiar names in here. I'm really excited for Cecilia today to dive into Aplos and show you how it can make your accounting so easy. Plus, I'll share a little bit of what's coming up with Aquila and Aplos integration and how they're going to be working together to create an even better experience for you and for your accountant. To give you a little bit of information, earlier this year, Aplos, a US-based accounting system for nonprofits, acquired Racely and Keela. The goal of bringing Keela, Racely, and Aplos together is to streamline nonprofit operations and fundraising. We know how challenging it can be to connect CRMs, accounting, and fundraising, and it shouldn't be. We're building deep integrations between these platforms and also working together towards a unified login and interface to give you insights across all three. I'm very excited to pass it to Cecilio. Cecilio is the VP of Sales for both Keela and Aplos. In addition to that, he has over a decade of experience working with thousands of nonprofits with their donor management and their accounting for tech solutions. We're very excited for Cecilia to show you what you can do with Aplos and how the future integration will be very valuable for your organization. In addition, we also have Jeremy in here. Jeremy is an account executive at Aplos, and he'll be able to help answer any questions that you might have throughout the AM call. Feel free to ask them on the chat box, and then Jeremy and myself can go ahead and answer the questions, or you could just ask them on the Q&A. And with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to Cece.
Awesome. Hey everyone, welcome. As Stefania mentioned, my name is Cecilio. People call me CC for short. I've been with Aplos for close to a decade now, and I've been with Keela now for running on year to date. So it's been such an amazing experience being able to um, work in what we call the best in class accounting and CRM solutions out there for nonprofits and be able to serve you with the best technology out there. So a little bit on Aplos. We were founded in 2009. We currently serve about 10,000 plus nonprofits. And we're an all-in-one fund accounting platform. So I know a lot of you might have heard of QuickBooks out there. We actually built Aplos on the frustrations our founder had with QuickBooks as he was managing his nonprofit. So a couple of key things that he always ran into was, how do I find something that's user-friendly, that I can keep track of my grants, is more specifically made for nonprofits? And he realized a couple of key things. One was that there was major players out there that are in the market, but they're really expensive. And secondly, um, as you have a lot of board members involved, and if they have to transition any specific duties, as you hire more people, how user friendly, what would be the learning curve if someone would use our platform? So that's the reason he created Aplos. Aplos is actually Greek for simple. So that's the meaning behind Aplos. And as Stefania mentioned, we're now working together, integration to come, but we just want to give you, at least in the meantime, a little bit of a preview, as most of you are probably right now mid-budget season on Aplos and can probably benefit for maybe introducing maybe a potential switch if you'd like to entertain the opportunity. So for today's agenda, we're going to be covering a couple of key things. So number one is fund accounting. That's as mentioned, that's exactly what we're tailored specifically for nonprofits. And what's going to allow you to actually keep track of your grants, your funds, your programs, and overall your donations that are also coming through. Another component is going to be the flexibility around our chart of accounts. So how easy it is to be able to program the specific chart of accounts so it's tailored for your nonprofit. Automation as well. So we're also going to introduce a couple of key things to be able to automate some of your accounting processes, such as approvals, recurring transactions, the bank integration component, and also the customizable reporting that is offered within Aplos. So the flexibility of no matter how large or how small your nonprofit is, the level of reporting that's going to give your board members the transparency that they like to view. And without further ado, let's kick it off. Awesome. So this is our dashboard. This is our home screen for Aplos. So when you log into Aplos, you'll be walking into our dashboard, which we like to give you an overall view of the health of your nonprofit. So at a quick glance, you'll be able to view your overall cash balance, your net income for the month, for the year, and you could toggle different items within your dashboard. So for example, if it's the amount that's owed or any bills that you're receiving, so any invoices, and you'll be able to toggle through a couple of your reports. So for example, your cash balance report, your overall income and expense report, and your overall contributions by purpose. So with that future integration, we're going to be able to pull in all of your contributions from your different impact areas, and they'll be routed into your accounting for accounting purposes. Within your settings, you're going to be able to update your org info, and you'll actually be able to update your fiscal year start date. So about 60 or 70% of nonprofits typically have a January 1 fiscal start date. But let's say, for example, if your fiscal start date is July 1st or October or August, you'll be able to update the org info here as well. We'll toggle over to our user section. Within your user section, there's a number of users that you can add within Aplos that gives you some level of flexibility here. So for example, if you're the administrator and you want access to the entire platform, you can add additional administrators, or maybe just someone that has an accounting at level access where they can just enter payables, for example. That's all they're allowed, is just they're within payables, they're entering bills, they're paying them out. Also some flexibility around the accounts receivables. So if you're just generating invoices, you have that flexibility as well within Aplos. One of our most popular user actually roles is our custom report managers. So for example, let's say you have department heads that want access to their own specific budget, but they don't necessarily need access to the entire platform. You can give them read-only access to their own specific departments, reports, or a specific grant that might tie to them. And there is an activity log, so an audit trail that will let you know who logged in, what time, and what was done within the platform for security purposes. If we can jump over into our fund accounting section, we can go into our account list. So this is essentially in the chart of accounts where you can set up the foundation for your chart of accounts. As mentioned, Aplos is made specifically for nonprofits, and our focus here is fund accounting. And a fund is just clearly that designated area within your organization that you want to keep track of its ongoing balance, any income or expenses tied to that specific fund. So for example, majority of nonprofits have what we call a general operating fund. It's what we currently use to be able to keep track of, and maybe this is where overall donations flow through. This is where maybe you keep, you expense out for salaries or to keep the lights running for the organization. But a lot of organizations also receive grants, and very easily within our platform, that is what our nonprofits typically designate as a fund. You can quickly add a grant here. As you all know, when you receive a grant, they're specifically sometimes designated towards specific program use, and you can keep track of an ongoing balance for that specific grant. And in a couple of minutes, I'll also show you how you can quickly budget for each of those grants and have it roll up to a consolidated budget for the organization. So once you've added your funds here, your general operating fund, your grants that you manage, you can go down to your chart of accounts. And this is going to look a little bit normal. It's similar to QuickBooks, where you can have your traditional chart of accounts. In your assets section, you can have your checkings, your savings, additional bank accounts. But the difference within Aplos is now is you can actually have your starting balances all designate towards one specific asset account. Meaning, if you have a number of grants, you can designate what the starting balances are for each of your grants and have it roll into one consolidated checking account. And that's one of the biggest differences that we see when organizations, for example, if they're using QuickBooks or they're not using a fund accounting tool, realize that they come with Aplos that they can consolidate multiple checking accounts into possibly one or just two. That way, at the end of the month, you're not having to reconcile multiple asset accounts. So really a time-saving option here. Within your liabilities, you can enter your payables, any credit cards that you manage. And of course, within your equity section, you can actually click and drag different funds if they're unrestricted or maybe restricted funds. And you can also have the flexibility of adding different groups within your equity section. And of course, your income and expense category. So for example, you can designate really quickly your no numbering system and you can rename that income or expense category. And there's another layer of tracking that we also offer within Aplos is what we call our tags, which is similar to what you refer to as classes within QuickBooks. So you're going to be able to designate whether a transaction was associated with a specific event or fundraiser, maybe a department or a specific program that you manage. And all of these different categories are customizable. So on the top right, you can quickly select the down arrow option. You can rename that category. So instead of events, I can rename it to fundraisers, for example. And you can quickly rename that category, customize it, and you can add as many different fundraisers or events within that specific designated category. So once all of that is complete, you can actually go into our transaction section. You can go into our register. There's going to be two different areas that you can enter your transactions. The first one is our journal entry section. So if you're familiar with the debits and credits, you can enter your transactions here, and that's what you feel comfortable with. But our most popular entry section is our register. On the top left, you'll be able to designate which asset account this transaction is associated with. So let's say, for example, it's our checking account. I can select today's date. And let's say, for example, we went to Walmart and we spent $500. You can select your expense category. So let's say it was for office supplies. It was maybe being filtered out of our general operating fund. But the flexibility now is I can either submit and post that transaction or I can split it, which is another area that a lot of our organizations really like that flexibility. It's maybe it was still designated towards office supplies, but maybe instead of our general operating fund, primarily, maybe it was a split between our general operating fund and one of our grants. And I can key in that percentage here and it'll enter those amounts here to the right. And maybe it was a split between multiple departments. So maybe it was a split between our fundraising department that requires some supplies and our finance department as well. And I can submit and post that transaction down below. For reconciliation purposes, it's going to be one transaction designated with $500. But if you actually select the transaction, it'll be split between multiple funds and multiple departments. So overall, really, really user-friendly. A lot of our organizations really like this flexibility. And there's also a paperclip option here. The paperclip option is going to allow you to attach any sort of receipts, invoices associated with that transaction. To the far right, it'll show your balance of $12 million in this exact checking account. I can give you this account within Aplos, just can't guarantee that it'll reconcile with yours. But on the bottom, you can actually scroll down and it'll show that 12 million dispersed between your multiple funds or grants within your organization. And also your traditional accounts payable, so you can enter any sort of bills that you might need to pay. The difference here is you can enter your bills, but you can also set approval workflows, meaning I can enter an approval workflow where it will require a specific amount that needs to be paid before we pay it out. So if I select my approvals, all my bills and my bills to pay, it's going to give me an option where I can actually designate where anything over, call it $500, requires an approval workflow. So in our approval workflow setting, for example, there's one for reimbursements where maybe it requires one approver, but maybe in our additional settings, I can select that anything over $500 is going to require an additional workflow approval, which is awesome. It's some level of securities that you can install within the organization, and you can quickly add someone as a second approval where they can virtually approve that as well. With our bill pay option, there's also a check signature option where maybe before you filter and print out a check, it requires an approval from someone so they can stamp their signature on that check. And also our accounts receivable, so you can create an invoice, you can generate that invoice, and you can either let the system know that you've already received payment, partial payment, or full payment for that exact invoice that you received. And of course, the full history. And as a lot of you guys are also aware of, there's also our bank integration feature, which is similar to QuickBooks's, where you can enter your financial institution. So let's say, for example, if it's, hey, we currently bank with Wells Fargo, I can select Wells Fargo, use my login credentials through our Plaid and Finicity integration, and it'll bring over those transactions I have cleared. So it's going to bring over your asset account, so which checking or savings account, the date, the payee, and the amount. So if it's green, it'll flag that it's a deposit. If it's red, it'll flag that it's an expense. All you would then have to do is code it to the correct income and expense category and fund that is designated to. The power of bank integration, though, is as you consistently use it more, the system gets smarter with you. So it's going to notice trends of, hey, every single time it looks like we go to Walmart, we typically use this expense category, and it typically always gets routed out of this specific, maybe our general operating fund. So it'll start auto-populating transactions, which will make it easier and save you time. And of course, our traditional bank reconciliation section, our check print, which I mentioned earlier, that you can select a number of checks, and it's going to give you the option to select whether you want the draft style or the voucher style with the stub. And our recurring transactions module as well. So if there's recurring bills that you have to pay, recurring receivables that you have to invoice, or just recurring transactions in general that maybe are auto drafted out of your specific account, you can designate what those recurring transactions are. So for example, if it's, hey, every single month on the 10th, there's rent that we have for our building, and I can designate that specific amount, or a specific utility vendor that we have, you can have it on a recurring basis. So you're not consistently having to enter those transactions, let's say, for example, on a monthly basis. And you can schedule each of those recurring transactions to be scheduled on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. There's also some flexibility around the fixed assets. So you can actually enter your fixed assets here. So let's say, for example, if you have a building, if you have a car, if you have some level of computers, you can enter that fixed asset here and set your depreciation schedule as well. And for example, with building improvements are 7 years, with buildings it's 40 years, and these are typically the standards that are given. But you can also add a policy with your own specific year count as well. And this is done on a straight line depreciation schedule on a monthly basis to be reflected on your balance sheet. Going over into our allocations module, there's a number of transactions that we realize that maybe are consistently split up over a number of grants or a number of departments. So let's say, for example, if it's a monthly bill that is split up between multiple departments, I can create a cost driver. And a cost driver is just what we refer to as a split. So I can designate the specific split, and I can let them know that maybe this is a split between my departments. I can key in my specific departments here. Maybe it's our finance department, our communications department, and maybe our administration department. And I can enter the exact split that I want. So maybe it's a 55, 25, 25% split. I can name that specific split. And anytime I allocate a number of transactions, instead of having to split them one by one, I can just select them all at once. And from the dropdown, select one of our splits that I already have generated within our platform. And it'll save you a ton of time. There's also a period close option. So after each month is closed, and let's say, for example, right now you're working on October's financials and you're closing out the books, you can also close your period here within Aplos. That way there's no editing that occurs. Maybe if there needs to be any edits after the fact, maybe it's an offsetting transaction that takes place. We also have an integration with PEX. PEX is an awesome option that we offer for our nonprofits. Your first five cards are free. Any additional cards are only $2 a month. But essentially, these are prepaid, preloadable debit cards that you can give your department heads. So let's say, for example, if our outreach department needs $500 to go to Walmart, I can preload that PEX card that I give them, and it'll actually auto-populate all of the transactions that were taking place at, let's say, for example, if it was Walmart or if they went somewhere else for office supplies, and it'll route them over directly into Aplos. So you don't have to key in every single individual transaction. If they don't use the entire amount, you can actually pull that amount back into your bank account as well. And I think everyone's favorite part might be the budgeting. I think a lot of you guys are in the middle of a budget right now or on the verge of creating your budget. So within Aplos, there's going to be a lot of flexibility with your budget. So let's say, for example, if I'm budgeting already for a 2025 fiscal year, I can quickly add that specific budget here. And I can filter now for each of my individual funds. So if I want to budget specifically for my general operating fund, I can select my general fund. I can select I can enter what I project to receive in terms of income for each of my income categories. So for contributions, for any fundraising income that I project to receive, and also for my expense categories. So I can enter one solid amount here. Let's say, for example, if I project to receive $1 million in contributions this year, it'll break it down for me over a course of 12 months. And I even have the option to toggle the show monthly breakdown option. And I can edit the amounts by month. So let's say, for example, if it's maybe I'm going to see a surplus in the month of November, and as well as the month of December, given that that's when Giving Tuesday takes place, I can edit those amounts here and it'll reflect it on the grand total. But I also have the option of being able to maybe decrease the amounts maybe during the summer months where maybe we're not as active with specific events. And you can do that for your general operating fund, and you can also do that for all of your grants. So you can budget specifically for each of your grants here, and you can budget when you project to expense that grant, what specific months. As you all know, there's also a number of grants that are multi-year. So you can even do a 3-year budget where you can budget that grant across multiple fiscal years as well. Once you're done budgeting for each of your grants or funds, I can select show all and it'll roll up to the consolidated budget for the organization, which is going to give you the power of going into your report section within Aplos. And I can run a comparative budget to actual. It'll roll up the consolidated amounts for what are the actual amounts for the current month, what was budgeted, and the difference, along with year to date. What are the actual amounts? What's the year to date budget and the difference? But more specifically, now you're going to be able to create a budget by fund. And this budget by fund is going to allow me to filter it specifically for one of my grants, or maybe if I want to just be able to produce a budget for my general operating fund and share with the board. So I can select my general operating fund here. I can select my budget percentage and annual budget as a column. And on the right, it's going to show what are my actual amounts, my year-to-date budget, and the difference along with my percentage of the budget and the total annual budget for just my general operating fund. And on the bottom left, it's also going to show a summary. So what was the beginning balance from the beginning of the year, the net gain or loss, and what is the remaining balance within that specific fund? Each of our reports you can download into Excel, CSV, or a PDF. You can also print it, save it, or share it as well. So let's say, for example, if I want to share this budget for my general operating fund to my board members, I can select it as a PDF format, and I can group all of my contacts within Aplos, and it looks like it's going to send that out to 12 of my board members. And I can select share, and it will share that whenever I run that specific report. A lot of you are familiar with also your income statement report that reflects your income and your expenses for a specific period of time. But one of the differences between Aplos and QuickBooks is our income statement by fund. So this report, within one specific report, I can show my team very easily how each of my funds or grants are doing within the organization. So what's their current status? and I can have them all side by side in one view. And in this example, it'll reflect my general operating fund, a number of grants that I manage, along with the grand total amounts to the right, all in one specific report. So it's going to reflect the income, the expenses, the beginning balances down at the bottom for each of my grants, the net gain or loss, and what is the remaining totals down at the bottom for each of my funds or grants, along with the grand total amounts to the right. You'll also be able to budget and show the overall budgeted amounts for each of them on this one specific report. And I also like the flexibility that you're going to be able to do a number of other reports. So, for example, if I want to show maybe a 12-month view of the overall income and expenses for my organization, I can quickly run that report. And any of our reports, if they're favorited, you can just star them here and it'll be on the top left, so you don't have to consistently scroll up and down to find those reports. You'll also, based on, remember earlier where we renamed those categories for your events or your fundraisers or your departments, you'll also be able to run more granular reports. So let's say, for example, I want to run an income statement for my departments. You'll be able to quickly run a report where I can, at a quick glance, be able to compare maybe the income or the expenses for each of my departments side by side. So this is super powerful when I can generate this report, display it to the board, or I can even show them as individual reports. So let's say, for example, if I want to show the administration department how they're doing, I can quickly download that report or share it directly to that department head. But as mentioned earlier, you can give everybody read-only access. And when they log into Aplos, they can go into the report section. And depending on what level of access you gave them to what specific reports, let's say, for example, if it's just for their own department, that's all they would be able to view is just reports tied to their specific department. Another popular report that Aplos users really like is our fund activity summary. So think about it as your income statement and your balance sheet with a 30,000-foot view of how your organization is doing. So it's going to reflect what was the beginning balance at the start of your fiscal year, income, expenses, any internal transfers that might happen. So it might be, hey, we internally transferred money from one fund over to another, the net increase or decrease, and what is the ending balance as of your current fiscal year. And you can toggle on the top left if it's this month, if it's this year to date, and it's very flexible with the periods as well. There's also our data visualizer tool. So if you want a lot more flexibility when it comes down to specific customized reports, you can select this toggle on and it'll give you an opportunity to be able to select some of our built-in reports that we have. And this is a little bit more complex. If you're more familiar with, call it, let's say, Sage Intact, or a little more flexibility there, you're gonna be able to toggle specific groups and maybe format the reports the way you'd like them within Aplos that you'd like to display to the board. And there's also our balance sheet by fund. So this is one of our very popular reports amongst QuickBooks users as well, where you can quickly side by side show your grants, your general operating fund, and on the right show your totals. And it'll be broken down between each of your funds, the assets, the liabilities, and the equity as well. We offer implementation services as well. So we have a full services department that, depending on whichever system you're currently on, if it's QuickBooks, we've migrated thousands of QuickBooks users over to Aplos, and any other system that you can think of, the popular systems out there, and we can assist you with your chart of account setup. We can also migrate historical data within Aplos, and we offer those services that we can essentially kind of be like your assistant throughout your entire migration, where we handle the entire process, and you don't have to worry about one bit about, maybe the only thing that we'd probably require of your time is just giving us some intel of what the previous chart of accounts would look like, any adjustments after we made those adjustments based on your recommendations, and that way you can go live for your January 1 fiscal start date. We also offer a number of resources. So if you have questions, similar to Keela, you can chat on the bottom right here with one of our members. On the top right is our support center. And we're available Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. if you'd like to give us a call. But there's a number, so for a number of different resources, and you can just search the function. So, and you can go either if you want to explore a specific feature, if you want to just type in here, hey, how do I set up my budget within Aplos? And it's going to give me a number of results. And it'll give you a step by step. If you like to read through it, you can read through it. If you're like me, I'm a little more visual, you can watch the video as well. But again, this is a little bit of a high level view on Aplos. Um, Thank you all for attending. As far as kind of next steps, I know there's going to be questions kind of coming in here in the chat here, but as far as next steps, we're going to send you the recording. We'll also, and if you're interested, feel free to let us know, and we can walk you through a more of a customized demo for your organization, depending on what specific programs or what specific funds you have and how you can be able to run those reports within Aplos. One of our account executives can walk you through more of a tailored walkthrough within Aplos.
There are some questions in there, Jeremy, that I think it might be valuable if I answer them because they're asking about the integration. So how does or how will Aplos integrate with Keela? How seamless will the integration be? So our developers and our product team are currently in the process of building the integration. We're expecting the integration to be coming in Q2 of next year. So yes, Linda, to answer your question, it will be integrated. The first phase of the integration will be Keela. We'll be able to send your transactions from Keela into Apple so that you do your fundraising in Keela and then you send it over to Apple so that you can do your accounting site from there. And you can expect that around Q2 when that's going to be live. And once we are nearly there for the integration, we'll kind of like send more information and details of how that's going to look like, the mapping of the transaction, expenses, etc. Does anyone else have any other questions for Cecilia, Jeremy, or myself about Aplos, the integration, or anything that we can help answer today before we... So initially, the integration will be similar to the integration with QuickBooks. So right now, Keela does integrate with QuickBooks. It's a one-way sync between Keela to QuickBooks. At the beginning, the Aplos integration will be a one-way sync, but we're also working on doing a two-way sync in the future as well.
And the difference is now that your impact areas are going to be able to be routed to your specific fund within that fund accounting report as well. So if it's a specific area that's maybe going to your general operating fund, or maybe it's specific to your programs fund, that's the power of the Aplos reporting as well.
Perfect. We do have a question from Monica. Oh, it looks like Jeremy already answered Monica's question. Linda is asking, maybe Jeremy, you can help answer this one. Is there a limit on the number of funds that you have at Aplos? No. Perfect.
Unlimited.
And Monica is asking, does Aplos integrate with Stripe or Square?
We use Stripe as our backend processor for specifically any payables. So yes, we do integrate with Stripe.
Perfect. And then Doug is asking any time frame with the two-way integration. We don't have a time frame quite yet. We do only have the time frame for the first release, which is going to be the one-way sync between Keela to Aplos. Perfect. Any more questions? This is a great time as we have both Cecilia and Jeremy who are Aplos experts. What about integrating with PayPal? Does PayPal work in Aplos as well?
Yes, we do have an integration with PayPal.
Perfect. Is there HST reporting? HST is the taxes for Canadian organizations.
Yeah, you can set it up with the use of tags, or some people do it with expense accounts. So we have Canadian organizations that do it both ways.
Thank you for answering that, Jeremy. And then Doug is asking, should work fine with Keela Pay as well, correct? So if you're using Keela Pay for your forms in Keela, once you're syncing the transactions from Keela to Aplos, you'll be able to sync it with no problem. And then the expenses, the fees are also going to be synced from Keela to Aplos. Perfect. I'll give it another minute or two if anyone else has any more questions. Perfect. Well, if anything, we're going to go ahead and give all of you back some time to your day. If you have any questions, please let us know. We are going to be sending over the recording, but if you're interested on getting in touch with a member of the sales team with Aplos, please let us know so that we can get that sorted for you. We hope that you have a great rest of your day, and then keep an eye out on your email for the recordings. And
Awesome.
thank you so much, Cecilia and Jeremy, for spending some time today with our customers and sharing this.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you all.
Amazing. Bye, everyone.